is notoriously contested. Some people assume that his virtue ethics becomes elitist. I think that's a bit too generalized a claim, but there's some truth to that. Some people think that his virtue ethics is reserved specifically for men, free men, members of the polis, and that might be a good feminist critique and so on. I don't want to get into the sidebars, but the idea is, in general, and this idea is what Nietzsche is saying is naive, is again, the highest values collapse upon themselves. Why? Because if I go and I live according to a virtue-based ethic, and I try my best with all my waking thought to act in the most virtuous manner, recognizing that everyone is not going to accord with the highest principles, which legitimize the ethic itself, those principles being virtue, people are going to act immorally, then they stand to gain advantages that I won't gain because of my conformity, right? Insofar as if they act immorally and are rewarded for their immoral actions, and I act virtuously and I am not, well, the values collapse upon themselves. Nihilism, you get the idea. This is a very quick, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. Okay, so this Aristotelian. And then the denial of life, this is Schopenhauer, right? Right. The denial of life, the sense of, and it could be many others, right? Especially after Nietzsche, right? Albert Camus, in some sense, talks about sort of this absurd existence, right? Whether it's absurdity or nihilism, whether it's articulated in terms of anxiety in Heideggerian terms, or if it's articulated in terms of disgust, this anxiety, this nausea. The French theorists notoriously talk about nausea. This sense of pessimism that Schopenhauer talks about is a recognition of the absurdity of our existence, in a sense, right? The more conceptual you get in your, and I'm actually writing on this on a side note, the more conceptual you get about your existence, your logical formulation, you very, very quickly come, it takes many, many years and deep contemplation, but you eventually reach the ultimate wall, which is, okay, I recognize that I need to make sense of truth. I need to make sense of truth. I approach truth. And now I want to change the tone, because now it gets serious, right? If I recognize that my attempt to make sense of my relationship to others and my relationship to myself in terms of a knowledge-based approach to arrive at happiness, well, I recognize that my own particular happiness doesn't fit into that schema. If I try and make sense of my existence in the world as a person, as an individual, in terms of a virtuous life, a life where I govern myself based on principles, conduct, and an ethic, and I recognize that the world is constructed in such a manner that those individuals who precisely do not follow the principles of virtue are rewarded, then it delegitimizes and also demotivates me to conform to the virtue-based ethics. So my happiness isn't of any importance to the world, and essentially my conduct isn't important to anyone else. I recognize then that I tend to, as we see, deny. I tend to reject, right? I pull back into a nihilistic state, and there comes a legitimized, right? It is legitimized, and that's the important thing to recognize in Nietzsche, right? There is a legitimacy to the resentfulness, right? It's like you take the blue pill, you take the red pill. You don't quite know what the experience is going to be. You're curious at first, and you start to delve into the depths of knowledge, and you're ultimately going to be confronted not with happiness, not with virtue, not with even a denial of life, that starts to get closer. But what's the point of all of this? Seriously, Jason Campbell. Not even Jason J. Campbell. Jason Campbell, what are you doing right now? The sun just rose. I'm in the office doing a lecture to an empty room for you guys, people I will never know. What's the point of this, right? You know, it's crazy. Is it? I don't know. I really don't know. And Nietzsche says it is this approach to truth. I put truth in scare quotes because, as you know, Nietzsche is not going to, he's not going to posit truth as the ultimate end. That too would collapse. And I'm not going to go into sort of the relativistic bits yet because we need substantially more of his analysis to really see where this is going. But the idea is, insofar as I recognize that there is a sense in which this life could potentially be meaningless, be completely devoid of any legitimacy, that my role in this world is ultimately trite, given the grand narrative of the world and my position in life. Why stick around, right? And I'm rereading, I was just mentioning Camus, I'm rereading Camus' Myth of Sisyphus now for some research that I'm doing, and it's his contemplation of sort of the logic of suicide. It's a heavy, heavy text. But Camus' contemplation of the logic of suicide comes really, essentially, chronologically after number 451. Nietzsche sets the stage for this contemplation of truth. He goes a step further than Schopenhauer, and Camus says himself in the Myth of Sisyphus that here is Schopenhauer with his castigation of life, with his rejection of happiness and this embrace of pessimism, and yet Schopenhauer himself didn't choose suicide as an option. And in a sense, it's Camus' it's his jab at Schopenhauer's belief, because there is a sense in which when we talk about truth, right, whatever that might be, right, whatever that, if you are the type of person that believes in an absolute truth, or you're a type of person that believes in sort of relative instantiations of truth, no matter what it is that you believe, whether it's a really, really substantial, sort of grounded, unshakable truth as absolute, or a more flexible, dynamic, non-monotonic truth, like I believe. Now, irrespective of which version of truth, it is the conjunction of belief and action. Right? If you believe something to be true, then your actions will accord with that belief. And a couple days ago on Facebook, I posted a comment that spoke specifically to this idea. One, because I knew I was going to do the lecture series again, and two, because it's true. Right? If you genuinely have belief in X, and X mandates that you conduct yourselves in a particular fashion, and you fail to act accordingly, one is certainly justified in critiquing and challenging how much you actually believe in what you say you believe in. You know, truth then, and this is important, right? I had to go slow through this to get to this point, but this is an important point. Truth then is a product, right? Truth then becomes a product of your acts. Does Dr. Campbell really believe that the truth of free education is empowerment? Right? It's not so much, notice the question, it's not is the truth of free education empowerment, it's does Dr. Campbell believe that? Clearly I believe that. This is, what, I'm like 200 plus hours approaching, maybe 150 plus hours, maybe 200 hours, because I only did last year, which was 114, not including the year before and the year before. So I'm probably approaching collectively almost 200 hours of lecture on my channel. That's a lot of freaking lecture for free, right? Do I believe that? Do I believe that there's some notion of truth in that? Absolutely I believe that. How can you tell? Because I've